Today, we're diving into the most destructive conflict in all of human history. We're going to pinpoint the exact moments the tide of World War II turned. Those times when a single battle, a fatal mistake, or one surprise attack changed the fate of the entire world forever.
So let's set the scene. It's the middle of 1940. And honestly, the situation is absolutely dire. Hitler's Axis powers look like an unstoppable force. They've just steamrolled across most of Europe. France has fallen, Poland, Denmark, Norway, they've all been conquered. There's only one major power left standing against them in Europe: Great Britain.
And this leads to the one question on everybody's mind back then. To pretty much anyone watching, the answer seemed like a terrifying yes. Hitler's victory didn't just feel possible, it felt inevitable. So how on earth did that begin to change?
I mean, at this point, the Axis momentum just seemed unbreakable. And you have to remember, across the Atlantic, America was committed to a policy of isolationism, basically staying out of what it saw as Europe's war. It really felt like nothing could stop Hitler's conquest. This brings us to the first huge turning point. Right at this moment, the fate of the entire war really hinged on the survival of this one single island nation.
See, Hitler knew he couldn't invade Britain by sea unless he controlled the skies first. So his objective was simple, and it was brutal: destroy Britain's Royal Air Force, the RAF, completely. This set the stage for the Battle of Britain, the first major conflict in history fought entirely in the air.
And if you look at the numbers, the imbalance of power was just staggering. The German Luftwaffe had way more planes and way more experienced pilots than the RAF. Seriously, on paper, Britain didn't stand a chance.
And this is where leadership became absolutely critical. The Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, rallied the entire nation with these incredible defiant speeches. But he saved his most famous words for the pilots of the RAF, immortalizing them with this line. He was talking about that handful of young, brave pilots who were literally all that stood between Britain and the Nazi invasion. And incredibly, against all odds, the few won. Helped by brand new technology like radar, but mostly just fueled by sheer courage, the RAF fought off the German attacks. By September of 1940, Hitler had to postpone his invasion of Britain indefinitely. It was a huge military victory, sure, but maybe more importantly, it was a massive moral one.
So unable to conquer Britain, a frustrated Hitler made what a lot of people consider his single greatest blunder. It was an act of pure arrogance that would become the war's second major turning point.
On June 22, 1941, Hitler tore up his non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. He launched Operation Barbarossa, this gigantic invasion with about 4 million Axis soldiers. To this day, it's the largest invasion force in the history of warfare.
The German army moved fast at first, but they had fatally underestimated two forces that you won't find on any military map: the brutal Russian winter and the unbreakable will of the Soviet people. First, there was that infamous Russian winter. German soldiers, who were totally unprepared without the right clothing, watched their tanks and trucks literally freeze solid. Then there was the ferocious Soviet resistance. You see, Hitler's ideology blinded him. He thought the Soviet Union would just crumble. Instead, the defense of their homeland led to the bloody Battle of Stalingrad, which stopped the Nazi advance for good.
So here's the key takeaway. Hitler's arrogance opened up this huge, grueling Eastern Front that just bled his army dry. He underestimated his enemy's will to fight and the sheer power of their environment. And that mistake would turn out to be catastrophic for the Third Reich.
All right, so while Germany is getting bogged down in Russia, another Axis power makes a move that triggers the third and final turning point, the one that really turned this conflict into a true world war.
December 7th, 1941. A date which, as President Roosevelt would later say, will live in infamy. The Empire of Japan launched a complete surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, and in an instant, America's policy of isolationism was over.
This single attack completely changed the global equation. Overnight, the sleeping giant, as it was called, had been awakened. America's incredible industrial might was now fully thrown into the Allied cause, and that decisively tipped the scales of power. So now, with Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States all united, the path to victory was finally clear. It was still going to be long, and it was going to be brutal, but it was there.
The finale in Europe really kicks off on D-Day, June 6, 1944. The Allies launched the biggest amphibious invasion in history, squeezing Germany from the west while the Soviets were closing in from the east. Less than a year later, Berlin fell and Hitler was dead. Germany surrendered.
But the war still wasn't over. Out in the Pacific, Japan fought on relentlessly. To avoid what would have been an incredibly costly invasion, the United States made the controversial decision to use a new, terrifying weapon. After atomic bombs were dropped on 2 cities, Japan finally surrendered, bringing World War II to its official end.
So the end of the war brought peace, but it came at a cost that it's almost impossible to comprehend. The estimated number of people who died, both soldiers and civilians, is just staggering. Somewhere between 70 and 85 million people lost their lives, making it the deadliest conflict in all of human history.
The true legacy of the war isn't just in the events, but in the lessons it taught us. It showed us the horrific dangers of unchecked nationalism and hatred, which fueled atrocities like the Holocaust. It highlighted the absolute need for international cooperation, which led to the creation of the United Nations. And it proved that even in the absolute darkest of times, courage can light the way forward. Which really leaves us with one vital question. The war stands as this permanent warning against hatred and aggression. And so we have to ask ourselves, have we truly learned the lessons of history?